everyone, and welcome to the Wings Radio program, where we hope that you will be uplifted and motivated by what you hear tonight. Now, here's your host, Glenda Lomax.
Good evening, Blog Talk listeners. Today is Thursday, November 1st, 2012. You're listening to Wings Radio. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and tonight we are going to be talking about affections of the heart, afflictions of the soul. Before I get started tonight, I'd like to mention that I'm kind of taking some time aside to work on some writing projects and some other things that are going on. So for the next 2 or 3 weeks, if you don't hear a lot from me, or if you email me or send me something in the mail and you don't hear right back from me, don't panic, because I'm going to really be devoting a lot of time to certain projects. And that's kind of a new thing that I'm working on. The Lord has continually spoken to me that He wants me working more on the writing. So I'm trying to be obedient in that. And in order to do that, I have to block off large blocks of time and not do anything else, because writing is not something you can work on it for 5 minutes and then stop and then go back and then go back and forth. If you do that, you lose your place. So I just wanted to tell you all, because a lot of you communicate with me or you send me letters in the mail or whatever, and sometimes you don't hear right back from me. That's usually what's going on. I've usually got a project in front of me and I've just stopped doing everything else to try to get something done that the Lord wants done or for a deadline. So I just wanted to put that out there and let you guys know. Also, the live chat room on the Wings of Prophecy site, I've noticed that there's not been activity in it lately. If you are a chat room user and you are using the chat room, please let me know, because I'm looking at closing that if it's not going to be used, because there's a monthly fee involved with it. And if it's not useful to you guys, then I don't want to keep it, obviously, and be paying for it if no one's going to use it. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. One more thing that I wanted to mention is sometimes you guys will notice that I will get a number of words from the Lord day after day after day for several days straight, or maybe 2 days straight or 3. And then sometimes He'll go silent for a week or 2. I have often wondered why that is. And I believe that the reason is because sometimes He has me working on other things, and He doesn't seem to give me as many words in those time periods, and it may be to free that much more time up. So He will give us more words, so they'll be coming, but I never know when I'm going to get words and when I'm not. So if you've been wondering about that, like I have, then that's my guess at what's going on. I don't know that for sure because He hasn't told me. I have asked Him, but He hasn't said anything about that. So He'll speak to us again soon, I'm sure. But in the meantime, we just go on about whatever we were doing. Okay, affections of the heart, afflictions of the soul is my topic tonight. Colossians 3:1. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Seek those things which are above. Colossians 3:2 says, set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on earth. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Setting our mind and our heart, obviously, on things above and not on the things that are on the earth. So let's talk for a minute about affection. What is affection? Affection is a tender feeling towards someone or something, a fondness, an emotion, that we feel. If I have affection for someone, then I like them. I have a fondness for them. I may have a tenderness for them, or a disposition to feel, do, or say, a propensity to feel affection for, to have that fondness for. And what is an affliction? An affliction is a condition of pain or suffering or distress. To be afflicted is basically to be in distress. It's to have something wrong. If I'm afflicted in my body, that means something's wrong in my body. If I'm afflicted in my mind, something is wrong. Something's not at ease. Something is not well about some part of my mind. So how do afflictions relate to affections? Well, I'm glad you asked. Affections of the heart are very important. The word tells us to seek or set our mind on things that are above, not on things that are in the earth. So that's what we want to endeavor to do. Deuteronomy 6:5, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy might. Mark 12:30, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. So it's clear that everything in us we need to love God with. We need to put him first. Matthew 10:37, he that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Now this is Jesus. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Luke 14:26, if any man come to me and hate not his father, and hate in that verse, if I remember right, I think I looked at that once before, and it means to love them less. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. In other words, if we love people or our lives more than we love him, this says we can't be his disciple, not a true disciple. Because the word tells us to put him first. And that's a problem if your affections are in the wrong place, isn't it? If our affections are really on our family and, God's kind of an afterthought or fire insurance, okay, I'm going to go to church twice a week and, I'm going to give into the offering plate. I'm going to call myself a Christian, and that way I'm sure that I won't go to hell. It's fire insurance. That's not a relationship with a living Savior. That is fire insurance. There's a huge difference. If you have that kind of relationship with the Lord, then you are definitely going to have affections all over the place that are not putting him first. Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Isn't that the truth? How many of us even know our own hearts? I mean, really. If we knew our own hearts, God would never have to lead us off into the wilderness, would he? Because that's what he shows you in the wilderness. He shows you your heart. He shows you where you're not obeying or won't obey, even though you think you are or will. He shows you that when you're out in the middle of the desert, crying out to him. So the heart is desperately wicked. So if the affections of our heart, those could just go anywhere if we don't control them. And if our heart is desperately wicked, then chances are its affections are going to be desperately wicked with it. That would be my guess anyway. Colossians 3:5 says, mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, I can't say that word, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Inordinate affection is something that is ordinate, is in order. So that's something that's out of order or out of line. The Strong's shows the original definition for that word inordinate means lust, sexual passion, that sort of thing. But the affections of our heart can be for a lot more than physical passion or physical pleasure. The affections of our heart can go quite a few different places that they shouldn't be. Affections of our heart can go to places like wrong relationships, wrong pursuits in life, wrong activities. And Jerry and I were studying this together, and he found this verse, Ecclesiastes 11:9. Be happy, young man, while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things, God will bring you to judgment. So in other words, go ahead and follow after your eyes and your heart, but there's going to be a judgment for those things. And the reason there would be a judgment for them is they're not godly things. They're not godly affections. They're not godly pursuits. Ecclesiastes 12:13 and 14 confirms that. Now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And God does judge the good things as well as the evil, obviously. Our hearts desire many things. And if we are not rooted and grounded in a true relationship with the living Savior, where he is on the throne of our heart, then we'll find something else and put it there. And the reason is because we are created for worship. Humans are created with a need to worship. If we are not in relationship with God, where we are worshiping him, then that need's going to be filled some other way, isn't it? We're just going to find some other person or thing or activity, and we're going to worship that. Because that's what we do as humans. Look at anyone who is not a strong Christian, and you'll find that evident in their life. Just look at them. You'll see what they worship. Whatever they spend their time, money, and attention on all the time, that's what they worship. I don't care what comes out of your mouth. What you spend your time, your money, and your attention on is what you worship, or who you worship. Whatever is first in your mind, when you make a decision, if your first thought is, oh wow, how's that going to affect my job? Then think again. The first thing in your mind should be, what is God's will? What does God want me to do when you're making a decision? And that's one of the ways that you can check your heart and see what's first. Is what comes up first when you're trying to make a decision? What is the first question that you ask yourself when you're faced with two choices? Check that. Go look at your checkbook. Where does your money go? Look and see where your money goes. Where does all your time go? If you have to work for a living, obviously you have a big chunk of time that's going to be spent at your job, and you can't help that. But what about your other time? I'm talking about your time outside your job. Come on, let's get real here. Our hearts desire many things. But when the desire of our heart is not God, then those desires might as well be diseases. And those affections will become afflictions. The children of Israel, long ago in the desert, tested God many ways, just like we do. And, you don't ever want to judge them, because we haven't ever had to walk 40 years in the desert, so we don't know what their life was like, okay? But in Psalm 106, there's a verse that says, in the desert they gave in to their cravings. In the wasteland they put God to the test. So he gave them what they asked for, but sent a wasting disease upon them. The affections of their heart were wrong. And so the judgment came in the form of sickness in that case. And speaking of sickness, it's a major killer. I think it's the number one killer in America is heart disease. Gee, I wonder if that could in any way be related to our love of sitting in the recliner all evening and watching television with the remote control in our hand, or our love of food that is wrong for us. And I have been as guilty of that as anyone Y'all have heard me talk about this before. But I wonder, you have to wonder, any kind of sin that you get into and habitually practice opens the door for enemy attack to some area of your body, depending on what the sin is. Different types of sin open doorways in different areas. For instance, it's well known among deliverance ministers that any sin having to do with the witchcraft spirit or the occult, because it is a mind control type thing, opens the door to things in the mental realm. So things that afflict the mind. Sometimes people stay in the occult for decades, and then at the end of their life they go insane. I'm sure that's not pretty to watch. Drugs affect the mind. Do they not? Drugs affect the mind. So I'm talking about recreational drugs. Street drugs, not prescription drugs you take because the doctor tells you need to take them. So if you do drugs for years and years and years, and if you study drug addiction, I had a friend that died of an overdose years ago. Wasn't even 30 years old. Beautiful, beautiful young woman. Left children and a grieving husband behind. She had been addicted for so long that what comes with drug addiction long term happened to her. Very often at the very end of the real bad addiction, they go into this really bad state of paranoia and fear, and their mind is just taken over. And that happened to her. And that's because drugs open the doorway to the mental realm. Because they damage your body. But just something to think about, whatever doorway we open, depending on what kind of sin we get involved in, we have to think about that. If we set our affections on something they should not be set on. If I fall in love with, mozzarella sticks at the local restaurant, and I know I'm not supposed to eat those because they're soaked in grease or whatever, and let's say I eat them 3 times a day because I just have this affection for mozzarella sticks, okay, I'm going to get into some serious health problems with that. That's going to fling the door open to the enemy to attack me. Because why? Because I'm putting trash in my body. I'm defiling my physical body with things that I know are unhealthy for me to eat. Now, that doesn't mean I have to live on, 2 lettuce leaves and a crouton for lunch every day, but what it means is we have to use wisdom and not get an out-of-line affection for something that is bad. I don't think that I, cannot have mozzarella sticks once a month or something like that, but not 3 times a day. So what I'm saying is balance and moderation. Don't get an affection out of line where you put it before wisdom, where you put it before what God wants you to do, where you put it before what God has commanded you to do in His Word. Okay? That's what I'm trying to say here. Because when you do that, then you're basically taking God off the throne if He was there to begin with, and you're setting something else on the throne. If I do that, I'm kicking Jesus off the throne, and I'm putting mozzarella sticks on the throne, okay? And I'm just using that for an example, so you can get a real clear visual of that. There's a big order of mozzarella sticks sitting up there on the throne, and Jesus is off somewhere to the side going, wow. Why? Because I put them first before Him. If I'm eating them 3 times a day, not caring that I, will die early of heart disease and not be able to fulfill God's call on my life because I went crazy for mozzarella sticks. Okay, now, let's talk about some biblical examples of affections of the heart going the wrong place. We might as well start at the beginning of the Bible with Adam and Eve. Eve's problem wasn't mozzarella sticks, it was the fruit hanging on the wrong tree. That happens. And the serpent talked her into eating it, and she did, and there you go. We've been eating wrong food ever since, y'all. Okay, another one. Samson and Delilah. One of my favorite stories, y'all know. Samson and Delilah. Samson just had a thing for beautiful, seductive women, apparently. You know, and I say that because his first wife, when he saw her, she wasn't from his own people. You know, and his parents discouraged him. They're like, can't you find somebody of our own kind, you know, to marry here? You know, do you have to go to the enemy's camp and get somebody? And he said, no, I like her, I want her. Okay. So that ended badly. So anyway, then he goes into a harlot one night, and, you know, then he meets up with Delilah, and he starts going to see her all the time. And he fell in love with Delilah. He fell in love with Delilah, and she was in the enemy's camp. Nowhere in there does it say Delilah loved Samson. It said Samson loved Delilah. Y'all ever notice that? He had affection for her. She was just kind of looking at whatever she could get from the deal on her side. She was an affliction to Samson's heart, because she was an affection that was in the wrong place that turned into an affliction. Just like his first wife. He was led by what he saw with his eyes. Okay? So, Samson trusted her when he shouldn't have, even though she was in the enemy's camp, because he loved her. I think that Samson probably assumed that she loved him. And she didn't. And so he trusted her, and she wasn't trustworthy. And she sold him out for some money. And the enemy came and got him, chopped off his hair, poked out his eyes. Back then they burned their eyes out because they couldn't run away if they were blind. And then they just put them in the, prison house and make them do work. And they put him in there to grinding. Okay, well, let's think about this for a minute. Samson followed what he saw, what he lusted after with his eyes. And it cost him his eyes. It cost him his sight. It cost him a bunch of other stuff too. It cost him his sight. They put him in prison. He was in bondage. Sin always enslaves you. Sin comes to make you its slave. And so he's in there grinding at the work wheel or whatever. And when sin takes you captive, that's about how it ends up. So he no longer had his eyes. He couldn't look outward. So he was looking inward. Maybe Samson started to examine Samson at that point. And Samson did begin to cry out to God. He said, Lord, just give me strength one more time. I know what I did was wrong. Just give me strength one more time. Come on. Help me out here. Let me take the enemies. They've taken me. They took my sight. Let me get revenge on them. He lost sight of God when he saw Delilah. The affection of his heart moved from God real quick to the beautiful woman that he saw. And y'all, that can happen to anybody. I'm not condemning Samson. I'm not judging him. I'm just saying that's what happened. It can happen to anybody, especially in the culture we live in. The affections of Samson's heart betrayed him because he couldn't keep them in check. But when he was in that prison house and grinding at that work wheel, and he was looking inward and he started to cry out to God, his hair started growing back. His faith started growing back too. And his faith grew, and then God answered his prayer. But Samson, the affections of his heart go in the wrong place. That cost him his vision, his reputation. They just made fun of him when he became a prisoner. They used to just bring him out and make sport with him. They entertained themselves with the man who used to be the big, strong Samson, who was now helpless and blind. He lost his vision, his reputation, and his position Whatever destiny he was supposed to have, if he didn't fall to that, he lost that too. God made the best of it, though. He always does. Psalm 9:12. For he who avenges blood remembers, he does not ignore the cries of the afflicted. When we set our hearts to God, we are set free of that grinding affliction, because God does hear our prayers, and he does answer if we cry out to him, if we turn away from those wrong affections. Sin is a form of idolatry, because an idol is anything that you'll compromise your beliefs for. And we've all done it at some point, y'all. 1 Corinthians 10:12-14. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. There hath no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Now, why would he talk about temptation and sin and then turn around and say, flee from idolatry, if idolatry and sin were not the same? He wouldn't, because they are the same. So how can I tell if the affections of my heart have run off to the wrong place? Well, one of the ways that you can tell is when you are faced with a choice and you ask the wrong question. The first question in your mind should be, what's God's will in this matter? If it's anything else, you need to pray about that. When are the affections of my heart not set on things above? When I have a wrong association, and by that I mean some kind of friendship or relationship, or a wrong romantic type relationship that I know God has somehow shown me or led me or spoken to me is not his will, and I cling to it. I refuse to give it up. If you refuse to give up an association or a relationship, and you know God is telling you to or leading you to, then the affections of your heart are set on that relationship more than they are on God. And y'all, I've had the Lord literally speak to me and say, I want you to cut off contact with that person and have absolutely zero contact with them, period. And it was non-negotiable. That was just the end of it. And I would find out later that that person meant me great harm, and I didn't know it. So there are times when the Lord will have you cut off things. There are times when he will just outright speak to you, or he will lead you. If you don't hear him speak, he will lead you. So don't pretend you don't know when he's leading you. He will lead you and show you that a relationship or friendship that's in your life is not one that he approves of or wants you involved in. And it may just be, a coworker that you go eat lunch with twice a week that, speaks profanity all the time or tells, dirty jokes or something like that, and he just doesn't want you around that. But whenever God is leading us away from anything like that, it's always for our good. And you have to remember, too, that if a relationship is wrong for you, it's also wrong for the other person. And that especially applies to romantic relationships. If you are believing for a mate, and y'all, I believed for 15 years. I think close to 16. And God sent my husband. I know who he is now, without any doubt whatsoever. And the Lord has spoken to me multiple times now about him. But there were times in the past when I got involved with people, Christian people, and looked for all the world like it would be the relationship that God would want me in, and God cut it off. You just shut it down. And the reason is because just because something is good don't mean it's God. Just because what you look at it and you say, oh wow, this has to be God, look, it fits here and here and here. Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Because God's best will so far exceed what you see as good that you can't hardly even believe it. It's so amazing. When He brings to you what's His best, it will far exceed anything that you could have chosen on your own. Okay, what are other ways that I can tell when the affections of my heart are in the wrong place? What about when I'll sell out and drive cross country for somebody I want to date, and I won't drive to the next town to witness to somebody that the Lord's telling me to go witness to? I won't drive across town for him, but I'll sell out and move across the country for somebody that I met online I want to date. That's a problem. That's a real big problem. What about when I'll spend $2,000 on Super Bowl tickets and I won't give $10 to somebody in need? What does that say? Well, remember what I said? If you want to know who your God is, look at where your time, your money, and your attention go, and you'll know. And I'm not talking about the time you spend at your job. If you have to work a job to support yourself, I'm not counting that. Not talking about that. I'm talking about your time, that you get to choose where it goes. What about when I have lots of time and I want to lay on the couch and watch the latest trash television all evening, but I don't have any time to pray. I don't have any time to worship. Wow, what's wrong with that picture? But I got lots of time to watch, Desperate Housewives or whatever, the latest reality show, whatever. I don't even know what's on television anymore because I don't have one, but I know it's not good. We got to think about this stuff, y'all. This is important stuff, and it will affect your destiny in huge ways. You will not do 10% of what God wants to do in your life if you make a bunch of wrong turns, and if the affections of your heart lead you off to the prison house because you were staring at Delilah and you took your eyes off God. Come on. We can't be doing that. Adam and Eve were supposed to get to live in the garden and not have to work. They got kicked out. Adam had to get a job. And there was Eve eating all the fruit. She probably had to fight her weight problem. Just saying. We got to think about this stuff. This is important. We can probably trace a lot of the problems in our lives to idolatry and wrong affections of our heart in some area. And if we look at those and ask God for help, He'll help us. We've let our affections turn into afflictions. And so the enemy's afflicting us because he's got an open door there. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Hebrews 3:12 and 13. Beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Sin will seduce you, entice you, drag you off to the prison house. You'll be sitting in front of a grindstone for the rest of your life. And the reason it deceives you is because it promises something it can't deliver. Sin always makes you a promise it can't keep. Always. We have to stop listening to the lies that temptation tells us. Any lie that temptation tells you is just that, it's a lie. We need to set our affections on the things that are above. And everything that we're involved in, we need to Try to stop and check and make sure it's God's will. And y'all, we don't always. Sometimes we just get into things that are just wrong because we're going 100 miles an hour all the time. We don't stop and check. But when we realize we are in something, that our heart's in the wrong place, or we're in a wrong association, or we're in a wrong relationship, or we're involved in something that we shouldn't be involved in, we need to stop and turn and go the other way. Lord, I'm sorry. I messed up on that. Please forgive me. Please help me get this right. Turn and go the other direction. Cut off whatever it is that you're doing that's not right and go the other way. You'll never regret doing what's right, but you'll sure regret doing what's wrong. And affections of your heart can lead you into some pretty big wrong stuff. You can end up in wrong marriages, all kind of wrong stuff. Living in the wrong place. You may be 3 states away, living someplace where God doesn't want you. Nothing's going right. Oh, he's showing me I'm talking to somebody. Okay. If you get out of God's will and you move 3 states away over some relationship or something that you were involved in that was not God's will, do not expect him to bless you when you get there. If everything starts falling apart and going wrong, you need to check and see if you're in the wrong place. When you are in God's will and you are in the location where he puts you, y'all know my motto is don't move till God moves you. I am sitting in Princeton, Texas, living in a rent house I do not want to live in because this is where he put me, and until he moves me, this is where I will stay, regardless of whether I hate it, because God knows better than I do where I need to be. And wherever his will is, his provision is. If you get in the wrong place, nothing else will fit because he sends your provision on ahead of you. Remember Elijah and the brook Cherith? When he told Elijah to go to the brook, he said, I've already commanded the ravens to feed you there. When he told Elijah to leave the brook, when the brook dried up, it was time to go. He told Elijah, he said, go to whatever town that was. He said, I've commanded a widow there to feed you. Or, there's this widow there. God had already arranged the whole thing. Then he sent Elijah. That's the way he does it. He ordains your provision before he sends you somewhere. And I'm talking to somebody who is in the wrong place. You need to talk to God. You need to pray and ask him if that's the reason why your life is falling apart, because he's showing me that it is. And I'm not sure who you are. Can't even tell if you're male or female or what, but you know who you are. Ask the Lord if you're in the wrong place. If you're in the wrong place, he'll help you get to the right place. But being in the wrong place will keep your provision from being there because he sent your provision somewhere else. It's like getting on an airplane and your baggage went one way and you went the other way. When you get to where you're going, you don't have what you need. It's just like that with God. Okay. That's all I have for y'all tonight. Y'all check the affections of your heart. And if you're in something that's a wrong thing or a wrong relationship, just, go ahead and cut it out. Cut it out. You're going to wish you did if you don't. You are going to wish that you did. If you know God's leading you to cut off an association or end a relationship, you just need to obey. He helps you get through the pain. He will help you get through the pain if you're being obedient. That's word for somebody. Okay, I hope y'all have a great weekend and be blessed in the Lord. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for tuning in to hear Glenda Lomax on Wings Radio tonight. We hope that you have been encouraged and inspired in your daily walk with Christ. You can contact Glenda by email at wingsofprophecy@gmail.com or by mail at Glenda Lomax, P.O. Box 127, Princeton, Texas 75407. Wings Radio is a non-denominational program and is not affiliated with any church or nonprofit organization.